That's fine. And this might be like, an hour of stuff, but it's like there's a lot of like speculative shit. There was actually another conference that I didn't get to go to. I did actually get approved for it, but I didn't see the email until too late. That was in Atlanta, RX Summit in Atlanta, and this is one of those conferences where people come and wall out. Like you get stakeholders from different sides. Sometimes physicians, sometimes patients that are like receiving pain management. I'll just make it a point to talk about that when we discuss learning.
Well, we're talking
at this particular conference.
We're talking.
We talking now?
Yep.
Okay. Well, let's go.
Let's go.
Hey, man. First off, I want to say it feels great to be back on the mic. It has been too long. Obviously, we say it every time. This shit is, we ain't shit.
Well, see, there's a nice balance. Like, you definitely want to produce content, and we're not like content producers. This isn't our jobs and stuff, but you also want to be like, you want to like do podcasts that are worthwhile. Like, there are people who, and this is their job, so power to them, but they dropping stuff every day. Like, I want the listeners to be, kind of
real shit,
waiting and fiending for the RTBTH.
Yeah, Malcolm Gladwell drops his shit in seasons. His is not an every week podcast.
Yep.
Now comparing us to fucking Malcolm Gladwell. All right. But all right. So today we have a very interesting topic, Tunde. I'm not sure if you brought this up or if this was just in the news and then we thought this was a dope thing to talk about.
Well, you went to a conference.
Well, I went to a conference, but even beyond that, there was like real world shit happening in real life, policy decisions being made, money being spent by the government, shit like that going on. And it happens to be some of the stuff that I work in every day. But the title of this one is biochemical warfare, particularly involving the fentanyl crisis that's going on right now. So,
Indeed. Yeah,
yes, I'm excited to get into it.
We're just probably going to have a little bit of a loose conversation. I mean, Herschel, this is your research. For people who are not aware, we are some researching ass niggas. I would consider myself more of a clinician, data analyst type guy, but Herschel actually out here doing some pretty significant researches. So hopefully we can just share what we know and just have fun. Just do what we do on the podcast. But first, this is the first podcast that we're doing with our new intro music. Shout out to Justin Blackman for producing this. This is a Blackman production. I believe that's how you say it. Shout out to the big homie Jamal for introducing us to Justin many, many years ago. I mean, this is one of the best things about life is meeting new niggas because of niggas that you already knew. So I'm going to edit it in, but any words about the new intro music, Herschel?
Bro, I love it. I'm excited. We got outros and shit like that too. Some drops. We coming up, man. It's great. I'm very excited.
Yeah, appreciate you, Justin. Here's the new intro music.
That nigga just got me feeling alright. Oh yeah. Got me feeling like I actually know how to do this shit. Goddamn. Freestyling. What's up? What's your boy? I'm so glad to be here. Back in the A. From Boston, man. Big Tunde, Baba Tunde, that's me. Let's go. RTBTH, real talk beyond the headlines, beyond the headlines, real talk beyond the headlines, beyond the headlines. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and welcome back to RTBTH. It's your boy Herschel. So happy to be here. The realest podcast in the land. Get ready. What we talking about today, Tune?
All right. Welcome and welcome back. All right, so we're going to just dive right into it. First off, bruh, so we're talking about, the opioid crisis, the opioid epidemic that's been going on the past couple of decades. Shit's been shifting in different ways the past few years. I'll give a little bit of background information for you and our listeners and shit like that. But I'm sure you guys have seen shit like this in the news. It's been multiple TV shows made about the shit like Dope Sick. Even like, and that was like a docudrama, more drama than docu, but it's dealing with Purdue Pharma and shit like that. Like there are real figures in a lot of this media, and then you also have like drama like Breaking Bad and shit like that kind of touches on the drug dealer and user side of the drug crisis. And I mean overall we got like who was it, Nancy Reagan or whatever, that was having the war on drugs, which we'll just kind of get into where we're at with that. War on drugs as we're discussing biochemical warfare. Yeah,
just got to give a quick shout out to Governor Maura Healey, the new governor of Massachusetts, who, when she was the Attorney General of Massachusetts, was one of the leading figures in the prosecution against Purdue Pharma. And I don't know exactly where things land, but Purdue's been ordered to, pay some whatever number of billions. And the Sacklers, specifically the Sacklers' own personal money, they're being required to pay money. But Maura Healey was a big part of that. I voted for her in the election, and I think she's the first lesbian governor in the history of the United States. So anyway, shout out to her.
Right, salute to that. Yo, also, while we're in the mode of saluting, bruh, so obviously we're talking about some shit that destroys lives, that is bad, but it also has been helpful. These are medical tools that physicians are using, prescribing and shit. So straight up, we got to say salute to science, salute to modern chemistry, salute to modern medicine. Because on some real shit, like we've come a long way since. So even like fentanyl and shit, I think it was first developed in like the 70s or 80s or some shit.
I think 1950 something, 59.
Okay,
maybe.
50, yeah.
Yeah,
it's
read
old
about
as fuck.
It just recently.
Yeah, so, and people have been in pain forever, but, shout out to Accessory to War, the book by Neil deGrasse Tyson and some other dude that basically discusses how like any technological advancement ends up getting manipulated and used for warfare or just destruction or, profit. Somebody is going to come up on, whatever the new thing is, whether it's, oh man, we got new plastics that can like coat your outdoor patio set or some shit like that, but also happens to be carcinogenic or whatever the fuck,
Yep.
But I mean, salute, like real talk, especially, you and I as scientists, like, we wouldn't be here today without the physicists, the mathematicians, the biologists, the chemists that came before that were like, yo, what if we do this? Like, what happens next? Oh, this is a little better than before. And then, oh, this is a little bit worse. Oh, damn, I made mustard gas. Oh, this is useful for fucking World War I. Oh, nah, that's too much, So in kind of just diving into this as a biochemical warfare, it's important to think about history because like the opioid wars were also a real thing. People have kind of described, I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but it's also backwards. The opioid wars occurring in China, where Great Britain basically had a stranglehold on their economy, particularly in Hong Kong, which they was technically like a British territory until, I don't know, a couple of years ago, like the 2000s, 2010 or some shit like that. Y'all look it up.
Yeah, it is recent as fuck.
Yeah, it's some crazy shit like that where, again, they, were utilizing this substance to just basically, oppress a people. And there's a lot of concern that it may be occurring today across not only the United States, but developed nations. North America, Europe has its own opioid crisis that's going on.
Wait. I definitely understand this is an opioid crisis, but when you bring up the opium wars, you're suggesting that there's some sort of external figure or organization or something that's like pushing this crisis upon us. Am I getting ahead of ourselves?
So that's the thing. Like once you start to, all right. So first off, a lot of this shit is allegedly. Like we cannot prove that China is out here poisoning.
For the lawyers,
yes,
allegedly
is poisoning American society. Like that's not what I'm saying at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to say, it makes me a little uncomfortable to say China because that wraps up Chinese people. I know people in the States who are Chinese or of Chinese descent, and it's not, it's not, it's hard for me
unfair
to say
to individual persons.
Yeah.
Just like
I go with CCP.
Americans are capitalized. I mean, I don't know. When Americans are considered, fat
warmongers
and toxic and warmongers whenever they travel, and all Nigerians are scammers and shit like that. Like, it ain't true. I mean, it's a lie, but y'all know what we're saying.
I go with the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. That's the villain in this story.
Yeah, and again, we can make that particular distinction because they are a communist country and they run all, or if not, 90% of the businesses, all the significant businesses are, supported by and supporting the Chinese government. That's, off rip. Mm-hmm. And, we might be able to describe some things similarly happening here in America, particularly in our military industrial complex. But, we're not talking about that today. We're talking about biochemical warfare, not warfare. Maybe another day. Maybe we'll have, our homies, niggas that we know that work at Northrop Grumman and shit like that to come on the podcast. And then, that'll be another day. But yeah, it's really important that, we don't conflate this information to just like jump to conclusions and, shit like that. But in doing that, I just wanted to say there's a lot of like misinformation out there. There's a lot of incomplete information out there. When, we're talking about China and shit like that, we don't necessarily know that, things are coming from there. We can't, there's not a literal paper trail. There are, substances so actually, let me take one step back. So opioids in general, right? Opioids are a class of drug that capture not only natural opiates, those that kind of grow from like opium plants and shit like that, which did fuel the opium wars in the 19 whatevers. And then you have synthetic opioids like fentanyl and hydrocodone, oxycodone, things like that, that can be developed in a lab. Because again, salute to modern chemistry, we figured out what the structures were and can redevelop them. So that's kind of where we're jumping off with like opioids, right?
Yeah. I'd like to say something real quick about opioids and psychotropic drugs in general. Like psychotropic is basically means that the substance has an effect on like your psychology, your perception, your how you're evaluating the world from a psychological perspective. And this is not necessarily like an exact quote or something that I can point to specifically in the research, but my understanding is that from a psychology perspective, opioids meet this need for love and acceptance and warmth. It's kind of like this, it's like when people use opioids, it's like they're being held by their mother, like that feeling, that personal internal feeling. It's like a feeling of being loved, I don't know, probably not describing this very well. Might have to cut this out, but yeah, they are a substitute for a very significant psychological need and desire, which, obviously there are the aspects of the physiological dependence, but, the actual psychoactive effects can, I guess, be a proxy for that for some people, which, may explain also why it's so addictive and why people love it so fucking much.
Yeah, for sure. And when we're describing like the changing of the opioid crisis over time, it's really important to think about how the increases in strength of these opioids really took a stranglehold on modern society, I guess I would say. But like basically it started in like the 90s or so with prescription opioids. People were in pain. Like I mentioned, there were new drugs that were like becoming readily available, Oxycontin and shit like that, doctors were just prescribing willy-nilly, like, oh shit, you're in pain. Well, I'm gonna just give you more of this. Like, we were having a conversation off mic about modern medicine treating symptoms rather than kind of trying to solve problems or prevent, different, toxic outcomes, adverse outcomes. So it kind of started with overprescribing of prescription drugs. A lot of people getting addicted, getting those same feelings that you kind of mentioned. And then all of a sudden people were like, whoa, this is kind of bad. Like people are actually getting hurt by this, whether they're overdosing on prescription drugs or, they're just doing toxic shit. Like they're losing, their livelihoods because the dosage just continues to not be enough for them. They're in more and more pain. And again, we're not trying to say that, people should not, these drugs should be illegal. People should not get access to them because there's a lot of people out here in pain. A lot of these strong opioids are for like, cancer treatments and shit like that, where like, they are like in legit excruciating pain. And even that is like a psychological thing that is very difficult for, you to describe to somebody else. How do you describe your pain to somebody else? How do you empathize with somebody else having pain? Oh man, you broke your leg. I see that hurt. That must hurt, man. Wow, that's crazy. But, at the same time, my leg's not broken. I don't know the feeling until, my own leg breaks. And then even there, my pain threshold might be a little different than anybody else's, which also, has contributed to, a lot of medical racism throughout history of, where they used to believe, this is not just a wives' tale. They used to believe Black people had higher pain tolerance than white people, and they would prescribe different things, and it would lead to stuff like Black maternal mortality, higher rates of Black maternal mortality, and just different shit like that. Medical racism, basically. But so after the prescription opioids were like, all right, we kind of need to chill on that. People are still addicted. So what do? They go to the streets. They belong to the streets now. So they're getting heroin and shit. And heroin is just, adulterated nonsense. It's that black tar. It's toxic. It's just as bad as everybody says it is. Once you own that shit, it's one of the most difficult things to get off of. Possibly meth is, the only more difficult substance to break. I don't know that there's a scale of addiction level, but, it's some shit like that. And then, as heroin, because a lot of this is, a market. Drugs, the black market is a real thing. Drugs, sell themselves. They move based on, potency and strength. And, okay, I know this dude has the good stuff. Well, I'm gonna go here. And, essentially heroin has started to be phased out. We're not even seeing that much heroin in like emergency department visits and death certificates and shit like that. It's damn near all
no more heroin.
Yeah, the shit's crazy. I mean, it's still out there. Don't get me wrong. The cartel would definitely pull up and provide you with exactly what you need if that's what you're talking about. But
so what's Cameron from Paid in Full pushing now?
Bro, he's pushing that F.
That fent?
Yeah, not the P. He pushing F.
Shit.
He pushing F, yes. So that's where we're talking about synthetic opioids like fentanyl, which are like way, way stronger than heroin, much stronger than morphine. Morphine is like the standard that you kind of describe opioids as. Morphine is one of those natural opiates that is harvested from a plant. I don't know the process. But it's out there. There's like, it fucking blooms. It blossoms. I want to say like the Ring Around the Posy song from like Nursery Rhymes is about that shit. But it, again, look this shit up. I don't know. I don't know everything. This is all allegedly. But
yeah, real quick.
Basically,
I just want to follow up on what I said earlier about the love thing. I found an article from the New York Times. Definitely look at the show notes. We try to put links to everything that we talk about so people can be informed. We're not just some talking ass niggas. We actually kind of know what we're talking about. And then we consult with the research after to confirm it and shit. But anyway, here's a quote. When people experience an opioid high, they feel warmth, safety, and love, said Stephen Chang, an associate professor of neuroscience at Yale. This is from a New York Times article. That's because opioid systems have evolved in part to fuel the good feelings people get from spending time with friends and family, he explained. Damn. I mean, come on. That is the most addictive thing on this planet is the connections and the love and, the warmth that you feel when with your family and, you hug people that you love and they hug you back and all that. That is the most addictive sensation, in my opinion. And if you can get that from a drug, matter of fact, where do I find me some fent?
Nah, bro. See, stop. You need to find you a family and get the love the good old fashioned way. But I'm sure it taps into some fucking, base, fucking primal instinct of like, okay, it takes a village. We live in societies that prosper when we work together. And if you can manifest that through a substance, just the feeling, our brains are dumb. They just want the feeling. They're chasing the endorphins, whatever it is to feel good. That's why we're so, easily sated on like, any kind of convenience to our lives. Like, oh man, you made whatever stressful thing that much better. All right, I'll take it. Oh, I got to pay, a fucking subscription fee. Okay. Well, people do it all the time. Bruh, if I almost said a prescription service for fentanyl, and that would have been really bad. That's a bad idea. We're not suggesting that. My bad. But basically, so we've got fentanyl in the streets going crazy and shit like that now. One of the big things that I wanted to talk about today is where the new quote unquote, fourth, maybe even fourth and fifth waves of where this opioid crisis is going.
Mm.
And
wait. Sorry, I didn't realize we were going through the waves. So wait, is the opium wars the first wave?
Nah. The first
so you're
wave,
talking about 3 waves in the United States.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, the 3 waves are like prescription opioids, heroin, and then synthetic
okay.
opioids.
Gotcha. We definitely are in the throes of the third wave. There's an article in Bloomberg, and there's a chart that just shows like from like maybe the early 2000s about how many overdose deaths are due to fentanyl or have fentanyl involved. And by the time you get to the 2020s, it's just like vastly more fentanyl. So yeah.
Yep.
Of course, like I said, show notes, link will be there. Check it out. Learn you some shit.
Peep my dissertation whenever that gets published, and you will again find all this information. But basically what we're seeing next is like, it's adulterants, right? People are trying to figure out, okay, well, I got fentanyl, but homie down the street also has fentanyl. How do I make my shit more marketable, more, how do I just get my customers back? Like whether it's like fucking American Gangster, call that shit Blue Magic. We've seen all kind of different names for different things coming out. But then also if you can just alter the product a little bit, whether you're selling it and you want the bulk of it to be a little bit more, or, quote unquote, more long lasting or different effects or whatever, they're adding adulterants, whether that's baking soda or other, non-psychosomatic. I forget what's the word if it doesn't affect your mental capacity. Is it psychosomatic? So I only know the opioids.
Psychotropic drugs.
Psychotropic, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
non-psychotropic drugs.
Okay, yeah, gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Non-psychoactive, I guess.
Non-psychoactive, okay. That's probably a better way to say it. Yeah. But so like people are adding tranquilizers, stimulants, things that like kind of counteract or amplify the effects of the opioids that are taking place. So we just talked about that increase in fentanyl compared to like heroin and shit like that dropping off. We're now also seeing stimulants, methamphetamine, through the roof. It's going ham.
Shit,
it's crazy.
I need that.
Nah, bruh. I'm telling you,
bro. If they're out here putting selling opioids and stimulants together in one package, yeah, go ahead and send that shit to my dope. I'm kidding.
That's the thing. Obviously, it's really toxic because a lot of times people don't know what's in whatever the fuck they're getting. You might go somewhere trying to buy some shit and you're getting, a cocktail of all types of things. And again, speaking of biochemical warfare, this would not be the first time. Obviously we talked about the opium wars, but fucking Germany was using methamphetamine to keep their soldiers awake during World War II. Like that was real shit where they were just like, yo, we need y'all to be up on game because the Americans are coming and we ain't got time to sleep. And they'd be up, 2, 3, 4 days at a time. Yeah. So it's, I read a book not unheard of.
During one of my courses here at Northeastern about that. It's called Blitzed. And it discusses like, I think it also goes into other drugs, and Hitler was like hopped up on hella drugs. But they were like really pushing that shit. Like the soldiers were like basically being shoved, or the drugs were being shoved down their throat, and I mean, I think that just goes to show more how completely corrupt and decrepit the, German military was, and evil during that time. But it's like one of those things, like you hear about all the atrocities, but you don't, that's another factor, is like they were addicted to drugs. These people were hopped up on evil and drugs.
Yeah. And then just given the most evil of orders, and they were like just going in and executing. It's toxic. It's a terrible thing. And low key, it sets us in a bad, position for shit to happen in the future. I mean, low key, I'm not saying this, but if we didn't have the opioid crisis, maybe 45 wouldn't have been elected. I'm just throwing it out there. That, maybe all these people were hopped up on pills out here in rural communities across America. And there are urban rural associations between, prescription opioids use, heroin use. I don't know that there have been any studies on fentanyl, because fentanyl is damn near everywhere. And we're going to get into exactly why the fuck is going crazy. But like basically since 2013, fentanyl has been off the map, going ham. So now we're 10 years later. And one of the big things that we're seeing now with like adulterants across fentanyl And this is the crazy shit about it is like, we wouldn't even know the shit was there unless we explicitly were testing for it and kind of identified it. One of the aspects of my job is to look for like emerging trends, whether it's in like social media posts, people talking about, different opioids and drugs. And you can, do a good bit of forecasting of like, oh, wow. So people started talking about this online and posting on blogs and Reddit and Twitter and stuff about fentanyl and opioids and stuff like that before people actually started dying from it. You can literally map this shit out. You can see it. And so now we're trying to continue to do that. I was on a paper, a study a couple of years ago involving Xylazine in overdoses, overdose deaths specifically. And just to kind of download everybody really quickly, Xylazine is one of those tranquilizers that I kind of mentioned as an adulterant earlier. People are seeing it. You're never seeing Xylazine alone. You're only seeing it pretty much with fentanyl. So Xylazine is not causing.
So it's an adulterant.
Yeah, it's not causing people particularly to overdose. It's actually a veterinary tranquilizer. They use it for surgeries and stuff. It's not, FDA approved for human use.
Is it used recreationally? Like, is it something that outside of the fentanyl adulteration, is it like a recreational? Basically, do I need to, start messing with something?
Bruh, no, because it's a tranquilizer. It just make you go to sleep. Like, it's almost like
you can't have
Michael
a
Jackson
drug.
Abusing propofol and like using that shit to put himself to sleep, which is a drug used for like anesthesiology.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? They give it to animals to go under surgery. Like they're giving it to tigers and horses and shit so they don't kick the fucking veterinarian while they're doing a surgery. That is that type of shit. It's not.
You can't have a drug called Xylazine. That's the coolest name for a drug.
Yeah, the name is hard.
Not expect me to want to fucking shove that shit up my veins.
This podcast does not condone any of that.
Just kidding, RTBTH listeners. We are some stand-up gentlemen here, and we don't do any illicit drugs like that.
I feel you though. Like, bro, there's an X, Y, and a Z in the name. Like,
I know.
It's fucking crazy. But yeah, it's very similar to like clonidine, which is a drug used by or approved for humans. But essentially what's happening is people are adding it to like fentanyl supplies where it's like all powdered up. It's not even in, the pill form. People have like pill presses and mills and stuff where they're putting the shit together. But basically they'll take the Xylazine that, they got a bottle or a barrel or some shit, possibly ordered from China. But it's also not a scheduled substance. So it's legal. Mm-hmm. Even fentanyl is not a scheduled substance. It's technically, it's prescribed. It's available. Actually, fentanyl might be Schedule 2. I have to look. I think it's Schedule 2 because you can't have it without a prescription type shit. But Xylazine, is technically, out here in the streets. It could be whatever it wants to be. But the idea is that it, as a tranquilizer, continues to lower your blood pressure. You just kind of go into a more sedated state. Drug dealers will tell you, oh man, it makes the high last longer or makes the experience on fentanyl or whatever last longer, which is, marketing. But it doesn't have any kind of reversal agent like naloxone or Narcan doesn't work as well with Xylazine. It may still work on whatever opioids are in your system, but like you're not going to snap out of it, but you're going to have like a super slow heart rate, So that's where we're seeing more deaths. People are like,
that's
passing
like
out
automatic
and
death.
Lesions and
Fentanyl and Xylazine, if they're both, I guess, what's it called? Depressants. And fentanyl is like a pretty significant one. If it's a tranquilizer, it's basically putting you to sleep. So together, that's just got to be basically just stop breathing.
Yeah, actually. So yes. So one of the things is like, your body has like these autonomic responses, right? So let's say you fall asleep. It happens to us even regularly. Let's say you're falling asleep while you're driving or some shit, and you gasp awake like, oh shit, I need to be awake. Like that's a response that your body has to protect you, to help you. Other
reflex.
responses, it's a reflex. Similarly, like, passing out, fainting when like something happens, the goal for your body is to make you horizontal so your blood, kind of goes to other areas rather than having to fight, gravity to go to your brain. It's just another one of those. But this sedative, this tranquilizer that you're taking is now depressing or blunting those responses to like hypoxia or like low blood oxygen. Like let's say you pass out and like your head, your chin is on your chest, like you can't breathe, you have your airways are less open and shit like that. People are dying from some shit like that. Or you're sedated and you're just laying in the same spot. Let's say you're laying there for, I don't know, a day or 2, 3 days. You're getting, your muscles are deteriorating, compression.
Yeah.
You're we're seeing in data, like there are lesions and shit. I think there may be some vasoconstriction that's happening, but again, this is new research, and we'll kind of get into it when we describe the conference that I went to.
Yeah. So real quick, so you're saying this is like an emerging fourth wave of, and is it specifically xylazine or just adulterants that's becoming like very problematic for, real quick, I just want to say, I was looking for the fentanyl article from Bloomberg. I found it, and again, show notes, check it out. I just looked on Google, and I just typed in Bloomberg fentanyl. The second result is an article from Bloomberg that says xylazine spreads faster than officials can act. Bruh, what's happening here?
Well, so again, it's all right. So let's say you overdose and you go to the emergency department. Most of the time, they're not going to give you a tox report. They're not going to like test your blood or whatever. Like, all right, what's in you? They're going to solve the problem, modern medicine again, treating like the symptoms that are in front of you. Okay, you passed out, whatever the fuck. Okay, let's get you up and then get you out the door. Because that's just how the U.S. healthcare system works. They're not necessarily like, there are preventive measures like, different programs and substance use treatment facilities, shit like that. But like, that's not, effective against an overdose that's immediately happening right now. And it's again, just an aspect of not being able to track like what's immediately going on, an emerging trend. We can track it when people are dying because you're getting an autopsy, they're doing a toxicology report, but all that death data is super delayed because, all the T's got to be crossed, all the I's got to be dotted. You really got to know what the fuck, like death data is a gold standard. It's great. But, to really get to the nitty gritty of like cause of death and why, and, at the capacity of, all the death certificates in the United States, coroners,
you gotta go dig up some corpses.
Reports. I mean, basically, and even then, the systems for, that's hella dark, but even the systems for doing that are like, bro, data quality is trash, man. There's nowhere where like the shit's going to be good.
We've discussed this on a previous podcast about how, I think you were working on some COVID stuff maybe, or maybe it was more like overdose stuff related to COVID earlier on in the podcast. The Coronavirus Chronicles. But on one of those podcasts, I think you were saying how like certain states don't send in good data, or so certain states don't give a fuck. They're just not sending data at all because they don't have to technically, and it just might not be a priority. Also during the pandemic, time frame, there were probably some states that were like, look, we're not doing this pandemic shit. We're going to stay open, and maybe they were kind of protesting by not sending data. But if I recall, I think maybe Kansas was one of the states that wasn't really.
I'm not at liberty to say any of the states right now.
I'm just going to assume it's Kansas. Send your fucking data, Kansas. No, I'm kidding. All right, yeah. But yeah, the data thing is, we talked about it on the podcast before.
But yeah, so it's very difficult to identify like where the shit is popping off at. We are hearing epicenters in Philadelphia, the Midwest, but then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, it's in Arizona too, it's in Georgia. What the fuck? So it's, yes, like just like you said, it's very difficult to kind of, nail down. And one of the things that, the government has been trying to do, aside from like, producing or proposing an increased budget to Congress for like drug overdose prevention research and shit like that, which they do, present an increase in budget every time, but that shit gets slashed because it's always a war. It's always, Ukraine or some shit that's going on that, they really care about because again, fucking, warfare versus biochemical warfare until it, is directly affecting politicians like that, they don't give a fuck. But a couple of weeks ago, the Biden-Harris administration had an announcement where they basically designated fentanyl combined with xylazine as an emerging threat to the United States. It was a pretty big deal. There was a RX Summit, which is a prescription conference that a bunch of different stakeholders come to. Sometimes presidents come and speak. They haven't been doing that since Trump, but he did speak maybe like 2019 or some shit like that. Obama has spoken at this shit. Different stakeholders like people in pain management, physicians, a bunch of physicians, epidemiologists, doctors, informed people, and also uninformed people on both sides who are like, yo, don't tell us, don't give these prescribing guidelines because people are in pain, they're hurting, they need this stuff. And other people are like, yo, you're giving too much. This is, and that line of like what's enough and particularly protecting people from themselves is impossible to find. That's just a human condition thing. We're always going to be, oh, damn. Well, what if we did a little more? But we probably should do a little less. It's one of those constant battles.
Herschel, let me ask you something. So 2 questions. So how, so you say that you had been on a paper with the Xylazine stuff. So how like much is this part of like your kind of main research area these days? Like, are you like kind of tapped in? Like you really are kind of following it closely? Secondly, where in the lifespan of this crisis or emerging crisis has the Biden-Harris administration landed in terms of being proactive or being late? Because, you know, the full fentanyl and the opioid crisis, it was like, oh yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of a problem, but you know, this doesn't seem to be, oh shit. Hella people are dying. 100,000 people a year are dying. We have a crisis. We have a national emergency on our hands. And it's just like, where did this come from? And fentanyl too is like, okay, yeah, I mean, you hear a little bit about it here and there. Yeah, some people, Prince should have been fucking around with that. By the way, Prince,
DMX,
Michael, DMX too?
Yeah.
Michael
it was
K.
somebody
Williams?
recently that they just, Coolio, I want to say, that where they were like, okay, they finally released the cause of death as fentanyl overdose.
Yeah, well, Michael K. Williams for sure. I think Prince as well. But you know, so you hear about things like this and that and here and there, but then next thing you know, boom, we have a fucking national crisis on our hands. Like, so where do you think so first question, how much are you involved with the Xylazine research these days? Secondly, where is the Biden-Harris administration late or early to this? Like, have we dropped the ball again, or are we finally getting ahead of it?
So again, the thing about it is like emerging substances, emerging trends are like damn near impossible to identify. Like you're looking for a needle in a stack of needles. Like what's going to be the next thing? You know, it's almost like looking for the next LeBron James coming out of high school type shit. Like it's a lot of people that we say, oh man, Zion gonna be it. But like, you know, you see how that type of shit pans out, right? So it's really tough. Like anything to have your finger on the pulse is, you know, a pretty good goal. And that was, you know, a pun also. Sorry, terrible joke, terrible joke. But I couldn't resist. But basically,
is that because people who are reviving
pulseless?
People
yes,
who are
that is a
overdosing
thing that
from
we
fentanyl,
see.
They have to check their pulse for. Damn.
Yeah, niggas
that
come
was
in
a little bit of a
like,
morbid pun there, Herschel.
Very sorry.
That's what we do on the podcast, though. Hashtag RTBTH.
Drug overdose is serious, man. It's all bad. But yeah, so the Biden administration approach is an interesting one. And again, there's people on different sides of this shit, right? Where like, oh man, do we take the Nancy Reagan approach of like war on drugs? Like, man, throw all the shit away and, you know, lock people up and do all kind of shit like that. But like, we see that doesn't work. When you put a focus on things, you know, when you make a thing taboo and illegal and, you know, difficult to access, human beings are great at fucking piracy, at finding a way to get to that shit no matter what. So in doing that, are you making it more dangerous for marginalized groups of people who are also in pain, working, you know, in rural areas with like, you know, labor intensive jobs where they're more likely to get injured on the job. And now they need some, you know, opioid prescription for whatever. And, you know, and this is anecdotal, but like, that's kind of the broad picture of like what's happening. You know, I didn't work in a, you know, labor intensive job and I hurt my knee and they prescribed me hydrocodone in 2009. I didn't even finish the bottle because I didn't like how it made me feel. That's another thing. Like, yes, for some people, it's like a true, like strong bond and reaction and response that they're feeling. And for others, it's a nausea. It's a sickness. It's rejected almost. And maybe, you know, had I taken it a little more, maybe I would have felt that. But thankfully, my parents, you know, being aware of the situation, were like, yo, you know, let's make sure you're not taking too much of these. Like, you know, we'll give you the extra strength Advil because you are in, you know, I had surgery. You're in pain. People are in pain. But like, you know, you need to be careful with prescribed substances, particularly those that alter your mental state.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We could do a whole podcast on this, man. I've been on this for a minute and I'm not very happy with what I see. And, you know, particularly with like treating mental disorders, mental health complications with medication. It's problematic to me, but we can set that aside for now. Yeah. You know, just to harken back to what you mentioned earlier, the show Dope Sick, good show. I believe, is it AMC produced?
I don't know. It's on Hulu though. That's where I watch
Yeah,
it.
it's on Hulu. Yeah, that's where I watch it as well. Michael Keaton is one of the star.
Yeah, he does
characters.
a great job, actually.
Yeah, but that idea of like getting kind of hooked and a little caught up. His spoiler alert. His character, got hooked on opioids. I guess was it the So it was about the Sackler. So it was
Yeah.
Damn, what's their drug called?
Oxycontin.
Oxycontin. Yes, Oxycontin. And then but there's the young girl. She like. Got hooked, and then she was trying to get off it, and her family was trying to help her, but then she eventually got hooked and overdosed and died. And it was for her, it was just an injury. It was
Spoiler
just like, alert. Yes, I said spoiler alert, but yes, definitely spoiling the whole thing right now. So sorry for the listeners who haven't seen it, who want to see it. But yeah, I mean, it's a real slippery slope, and it's not really like, I mean, your dad's a physician, so he was a very significant factor. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't suspect that you would be the type to get hooked on, opioids and then progress to heroin.
Man. That's kind of the thing. You never know who's getting involved. And one of the theories behind like why, politicians and stuff like that, big CEOs and things are making large donations to the cause for, overdose prevention and stuff like that is because they're now having like family members and young sons and daughters and nephews and nieces and stuff like that are getting addicted to drugs and then killing themselves or, just losing their lives, stealing from like people from good families. Even in the show that you described, Michael Keaton is a physician and was prescribing that shit and then got hooked on it himself.
Yeah.
And was going to the doctors and lying and be like, oh man, I got back pain. And, from being sports fans, we already know back pain is one of the most difficult things to like truly diagnose. I mean, any pain, somebody tells you they're in pain, you can either believe them or not believe them. Like there isn't really, there are scales that, physicians try to use, but like how accurate is that when we all, are living our own lives, experiencing our own, minute pains and, micro pains all the time. So it makes it really difficult. And then, to kind of readdress your question earlier about how do we address the crisis that's going on and how are we doing? First off, awareness is really important. Getting it in the news is a positive thing. But at the same time, when does it become glamorizing? When does it become, oh, well, that's something that young people will seek out because they know that it's considered toxic. And, everybody these days is, on that YOLO stuff of like, all right, well, I got, but so long to get it in. And like, I'm not going to be the one to get addicted. I'll be okay. I have, this access to these resources and doing this and that. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of spirals out of control. So I do think that, this is better than trying to sweep it under the rug, but I don't know, I don't know the solutions. I'm on the surveillance and epi side. I'm not as much on the prevention side. We try to inform prevention by saying, all right, so these groups are, at higher risk. These groups are having these particular issues. They're relapsing. These people who are prescribed this are actually also taking this. So when you are treating these people for this, make sure you watch out, trying to inform, the doctors that are on the front line. I actually had a physician ask me like, oh man, so what do I do about this? I was like, bro, that's not my job. That's your job. In fact, when you have somebody in your emergency department or whatever that's, overdosing and you can't, get them to respond, they're unresponsive and naloxone and Narcan and shit like that isn't working. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's again, this epic struggle of chemistry of like, all right, there will be a new solution. There will be a quote unquote cure to this, just like Narcan was developed and discovered as like, okay, this is a new combatant in this war, but it's not going to stop. Even once we, defeat fentanyl, there will be a new thing that pops up, which is, again, the human condition of like, all right, there's always going to be something. We have evolved from infectious diseases as a first world country to chronic diseases of, obesity, diabetes and shit like that to now, well, there are, mental disorders and stuff like that, but I don't even know what you classify. Well, it's substance use treatment. It's pain disorders. It's pain management. It's shit like that. And well, I don't know what we do next. I don't know how we evolve from this.
I mean, me personally, this is a sociological angle, but I feel like, we are in a nation where many orders of people don't have great purpose and they have like a very negative outlook, whether it's job circumstances, financial stuff. People are having difficulty with their families. And there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of pain to go around, and there's so many disparities.
Yep.
Socioeconomic disparities are a pretty stark one in our country specifically. The disparity between the wealthy and the not wealthy. And but it's not even just that, it's purpose, like people who, who work, I guess, low skill jobs or labor jobs are not being paid like a great wage. It feels harder and harder to take care of a family with just having a standard job without, having like the most complicated fucking like knowledge, intellectual cerebral job there is out there. Like if you just want to do a regular job and take care of your family, it's becoming less possible. And again, there's plenty of pain to go around. And, when you are looking for some sort of salve, and I'm not saying specifically just opioids, but the entire spectrum of somehow alleviating that pain is going to move in a negative direction when it's this chronic and it's just persistent. And, I don't want to blame the government completely because I don't personally believe the government can solve all our problems. But, when the government has dropped the ball on so many things, people are going to turn to alternative solutions. And sometimes that is, these pain medications, medication in general. But I think, we're in a state where people think I hate to say it, a lot of this is physicians too. Like the solution to a lot of problems is some kind of medical intervention, whether it's some kind of like, procedure or medication. But to me, that's just a short-term Band-Aid for actually trying to develop change and a healthy lifestyle and mutual respect for all people and mutual dignity. Anyway, went on my sociology high horse there for a second, but
no, I feel you. And so one of the things that we wanted that kind of sparked this conversation was like, should we be treating fentanyl and all its adulterants, just the crisis overall, as a weapon of mass destruction? Like, should it get a designation so that, more resources can be thrown towards finding solutions and just mitigating the pain and suffering and burden that there is on society, economically, on the health system, on people's, mental health psyches. If you have a friend or a family member that overdoses, you're going to be kind of fucked up for a bit, and already, the mental health crisis is kind of going, you just alluded to this, it's going ham in the United States. The pandemic didn't help, where people were out of work in a lot of different spaces and, didn't necessarily have jobs that they could do working from home. And even then, you stuck in the house and, seeing other people on social media having fun, it's tough. It's, we live in a society, truly. It's all bad. So yeah. I think that,
well, tell us about the conference, Herschel. That's how this whole podcast got sparked.
All right. So I went to this conference. It was called ACMT, the American College of Medical Toxicologists. These are toxicology doctors, basically.
Bro, that's like the most obscure scientific shit ever, bro. We've all been there. Like all of us researchers, I'm sure. Oh, by the way, we didn't mention our official third co-host is not with us. He's in Nigeria right now, looking fresh. At a wedding. So shout out to her. I'm sure he would definitely drop some knowledge on us. But yeah, man, all of us, man, we'd be going to the most obscure science. Like no one would ever hear about these conferences unless you were there. Yep. Anyway,
they just nerd out about their tox shit. They had a fucking cake. So a lot of the stuff is like, oh man, snake bites and just any toxic ingestion that might occur at a large scale for human beings. So a lot of this snake bites, spider bites or shit like that. But it also incorporates a lot of drugs, a lot of drug talk. And Xylazine was the fucking belle of the ball at this shit. Everybody had some shit to say about it. And it was not good. It was not good. They were showing, doctors were coming in with like, oh man, I had this patient, they had all these lesions. I'm not sure what the fuck is going on. They are, abusing opioids. Xylazine may be in the picture, but we don't really know. Oh, we got this toxic report back. It is in here. Oh, by the way, they're shooting up into the skin lesions that they're having. There's like all types of necrosis and shit happening. So again, I think I mentioned earlier, I'm trying to find the word. Cytotoxic, I think is a better word, where, it's basically, toxins that are just bad for cells, is killing your shit. And then all of a sudden your fucking limbs are falling off. And people are coming into the hospital for that rather than for the drug overdose. So we don't even know that you're abusing this shit. We just know you're in here because you have some other problem, and then they're treating that and maybe not necessarily getting you as quickly out the door. They may keep you for extra tests and just kind of try to figure out what's going on. But like, there's not a great way to stop this. I think that maybe if we were to schedule xylazine as a substance so that it's not as easy to access. Tune, if you Googled it right now, you probably could find a barrel. But even now, though, because it's kind of hit the news cycle, it might be a little
already
bit more
put an order in, bro.
Difficult. Oh, bro, I see.
No, I'm kidding. God, I'm about to be strung out.
Yeah, bro.
I'm about
and
to pull
the
up
feds
to
gonna
the
be knocking
crib.
at your door like, excuse me. We heard on RTBTH, we heard it here first, in fact, that you were ordering barrels of xylazine.
I'm like, I'm just playing a character, FBI. Screw you.
Yeah, this is satire. This whole thing. We don't know a goddamn thing. But yeah, so they were just describing like, yo, what the fuck do we do? We, this is where we're seeing it at. We're seeing it in literally every sample of fentanyl that was coming in, upwards of 90+%. I shouldn't say 100%, though there were some labs that were like, yo, every sample that we tested, we tested 150 different samples, and we stopped testing at 100 because 100 in a row were positive for xylazine and fentanyl, and we thought the test was broken, so we stopped.
Damn.
But even then, it was like, yo, hold up,
Damn.
this is actually an accurate thing, and that may be, again, drug supply. Like, okay, if it's unlikely that all those samples came from the same person. A lot of the times these are or the same drug manufacturer or whatever. But like, these are convenient samples. It's not like, we're random sampling every single dosage of fentanyl around and being able to accurately identify. We're only, again, in terms of surveillance, we're only seeing what's showing up. It's similar to COVID of like, yo, I forget what that thing was. It might have been the vaccine or some shit where Cardi B or Nicki Minaj was talking about their cousins, aunties, uncles, somebody in the Caribbean.
Yeah,
their shit
Nicki
fell off because they got the vaccine. And it's like, yo, that's not how it works. But two, we don't even know that might be a possibility unless you come tell us about it. And the fact
also,
that you
what vaccine was you taking? Like,
yeah, exactly.
You say it's a vaccine, but
exactly. So that every time, there's a level of dilution of like the information, it makes it more and more difficult to track. And again, mortality data, death data is probably the best, but like it's delayed. And, one would argue it's a little too late by that point because at least that person has died. Sure, we could try to use that data to save lives in the future, but it's, the epic battle. It's the constant battle of like, all right, so, now that we have this new information, what can we do about this for the next person or the next generation or whatever? So I think that, we're on the right track, I guess, in terms of like studying it, looking for it. I've been asked to do a couple of different like queries to try to search the data that we do have to identify like, all right, so where is that shit for real? Like, what do we have? But even then, data quality is difficult to come by. And it doesn't pop up as like, oh, you overdosed on xylazine. Xylazine is not a substance that you'll overdose on. I'll just say that is just a fact. It'll put you to sleep. You could die, but it's not necessarily an overdose if you overly sedate yourself and just never wake up. It's just malpractice, I guess. But it's not malpractice, I guess, if you're not a doctor. But like, you poisoned yourself. You basically poisoned yourself. I guess you could consider that an overdose. But that's just not the way that it's consumed. You don't get the highs that opioids give you. So it wouldn't really be that type of party, pretty much.
Yeah, I gotcha. So let's get into the weapons of mass destruction talk. And I mean, so you sent the conference information. You were just like, yeah, I'm going to this conference. And I think we've had like little conversations here and there about fentanyl and, how it's sort of exploded onto the scene in America, in the US. I forget. Do you remember the title of the conference of the talk?
Nah, I would have to look it up. But I did add an article here that's basically like fentanyl as a chemical weapon. So it kind of gets into describing it not only as a pharmaceutical, but like as an illicit substance that people are misusing, beyond that. So this also kind of stemmed from, I just watched Snowfall, which just ended. Great season. I don't know if you watched that, but you should definitely check it out. But basically, it's a story loosely based on Freeway Ricky and how the CIA flooded Compton and other black communities with cocaine that was then developed into crack cocaine to fuel the war in Venezuela and the Contra wars, shit like that, right? So like it was an operation. These are like clear documents, released like this is like real shit that happened. Isn't that part of it is not a conspiracy theory? But for this, people are speculating. People are speculating that fentanyl is being used in similar ways of like, oh well, if we just get it out here in the streets, these communities will destroy themselves, and if we make some money off this at the same time, then it benefits us, particularly in the case of what did you say, CCP or PPC? Yeah, People's CCP. Republic of China. What's the acronym?
Well, People's Republic
Communist Party,
PRC,
CCP.
But
so
CCP
for them,
Chinese Communist Party.
Chinese Communist Party. So basically, they can't go to war with the U.S. There's money involved. They they profit off of us, and we also profit off of them. We have an economic relationship that is strong, regardless of how our political relationship is, especially with, Russia just right around the corner there, buddy, whatever. But if they have found a way to, flip the script of the opium wars of what the British did to them, where, again, it was an economic relationship that they had where the British were profiting off of Chinese labor. If they can kind of do the same thing, like, oh, there are these consumers over here in America, we can sell them whatever the fuck and do whatever. And then we can also incapacitate them by getting them addicted, or a percentage of Americans addicted to some substance that, we can manipulate, we can control, and just, this is just another hole in their armor that, they can kind of exploit. It could be considered toxic. Yeah, this is speculative. Like there's no way for us to prove like that this is the case. But the fact that it is, affecting the masses in 2021 alone, again, I mentioned that the data is delayed. So we only have like provisional data for 2022. We have nothing in terms of death data for 2023. But 2021 alone, it was over 100,000 deaths. That's the first time that's happened in history. And it's only going to go up as, more crises happen. We're doing what we can to slow that increase. Hopefully, we can get it down, get more information out to the streets, and I don't know if DARE programs and shit like that are the way, but informing people to the dangers of misusing substances and just knowing what they're consuming is probably the next best thing that we can do. So another aspect of it is like pharmaceutical tourism that also happens where, for example, because the U.S. healthcare system is super fucked up, people who can't get whatever they've been prescribed or whatever they need, they'll go to Mexico, they'll go to Canada. It's more the case in Mexico, but let's say you go to a pharmacy in Mexico and you need Adderall, you need, a light prescription of, some painkiller, some opioid, some whatever. One, you're going to get it, whether you have a prescription or not. It's a high possibility that you'll be able to access what you need. But two, it may not necessarily be what you asked for. There are where, there are adulterants and stuff like that. And let's say you bring the stuff back and now you've spread it to a community and people are making these trips, for sure. Yes, there's, Mexican cartels and stuff that people need to watch out for. But like that doesn't stop people from traveling. Like, as we know, even in the pandemic, people were out here in the streets. I was out here in the pandemic streets trying to travel and see the world. So just because there are rules and regulations doesn't stop people from breaking those motherfucking rules, which is, again, a human condition. I think that awareness is the way. I think that, we need to, again, rethink the U.S. healthcare system. But again, easier said than done there. We're trying our best to go into a more preventive strategies rather than just, treating symptoms, prevention and intervention. But, prevention is the way. Like that's how we're going to save money. It's way cheaper to stop somebody from ever even, getting to that point than trying to pull somebody back from the edge.
You heard it here first.
Check us out. Check us out. Check us out. That's what I do. That's how.
Hey man, it's gonna make your head explode.
Check us out. 5 letters, 5 words. 5 letters, 5 words. 5 letters, 5 words. Beyond the headlines. Beyond the headlines.
Okay. Yeah, man. Actually had to fix some issues with the audio and whatnot. So we back. Herschel, what were you talking about? Do you remember? You want to get us going?
Yeah, man. So I wanted to kind of wrap up the conversation on WMDs because there were some like actual congressional acts that were put forth last year trying to describe it as a weapon of mass destruction. And one of the things, so first we should probably like define that. So a weapon of mass destruction is basically something that, is capable of, affecting a large group of people and is really toxic. And the way that they wrote it up, and I think it was Kentucky that actually wrote this shit up, that was like, due to the low cost of production, inherent lethality, and vast availability, fentanyl is an ideal chemical weapon for bad actors. And then, attorneys and stuff are always writing shit that kind of describes it in like worst case scenario when they say stuff like, oh man, just 2 milligrams of fentanyl are needed to kill an adult. Like, that's not really how the body works. Like, if you were a person that was continuously taking fentanyl for, a prescription or whatever, or just taking it recreationally, your body would be more used to the two milligrams. But like, let's say you are a 150-pound adult person and all of a sudden you took 2 milligrams of fentanyl. Yeah, that could kill you. And even that, I'm just saying some shit, basically. I really don't, I don't know the numbers to it. There's a greater science to like the half-lives and chemicals and shit, how it's working within your body. But also there was a recent, literally just yesterday, and we like to shout out the New England Journal of Medicine, but they just dropped a new Xylazine acronym, basically, and it's it's called Faax, FAAX, fentanyl, adulterated or associated with Xylazine. So again, we were talking about how
Wow.
the name is kind of hard, bro. You can't be out here
I
dropping
know.
hard ass names for drugs and poisonings and shit like that. But like, there are the described number of deaths between 2018 and 2021. And that shit has jumped from like below 500 to 3,500 in a 3-year span, which is still, in terms
overdoses?
of numbers, overdoses involving, overdose deaths involving xylazine. Yeah. And so the paper that I did was on 2019 data. We still only knew about a certain amount of it. And even then, motherfuckers got to test for it. If you're not testing, let's say you have like some commercial lab, like, I don't know, LabCorp or Quest Diagnostics, or, those are some of the bigger ones around the country and stuff. But like, if they don't have it on the panel, or the medical office or the doctor's office that's sending the tests into the laboratory to be tested are not saying, yo, maybe you should look into xylazine, we have no clue. It could very well be that xylazine has been out here in the streets for a while and we just didn't know. You know what I mean? So that it's really toxic there. It's really concerning there. And it does have the potential to, negatively affect a whole lot of people, kill a whole lot of people. But I think that the hyperbole is almost, I don't want to say almost as dangerous, but it also could be dangerous.
Of calling it a WMD?
Yeah. That just, it again, amplifies with no better way to say it. It just makes it cool. You can't be calling stuff weapons of mass destruction willy-nilly. You can't be giving stuff cool acronyms. You just can't do it. It's not, our society is really fucked up, man. People are going to seek that type of shit out. It happens all the time. It's happened with shit like tattoos, piercings, where, our Puritan society tried to push people away from shit like, just, tangentially associated with sex or an alternative lifestyle. People are drawn to that stuff all the time. Yeah. People are going to be drawn to drug use. It's a culture in and of its own. So how we treat it, how we go forward is really important. We need to be strategic. We need to be tactful. I don't know that there's a good way to do it. And I'm not saying we just ride out the storm. Like, there is, shit that we need to be doing, preventive strategies that we need to be putting in place, which we are putting in place in a lot of different ways. And probably the biggest thing is making sure that we're up on game, like looking, still, identifying like, all right, this is emerging. Okay. So we can, at the very least, make it less or, not as bad as it would have been if we didn't do anything, which is also what happened with COVID. COVID was pretty bad for a lot of people, but because of measures that were, steps that were taken, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. You know what I mean? And people, society doesn't necessarily always see that. They just see the bottom line, which sucks. But that's also the life of a researcher, a scientist. You don't necessarily always see the fruits of your labor in the ways that you wanted it to be seen. Life just don't work like that.
Yeah, I read about the WMD thing a little bit too. It was brought as a bill proposal by some Congress people, one of them being Lauren Boebert, who is a firebrand politician and does like every photo op she does is with a gun. So, take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, I mean, from what I understand, though, like you said, the WMD classification is a little extra. Not a little, it's kind of a lot extra. And the thing is that they were like, a WMD is like, it's in terms of chemical warfare, is, like the sort of agents that you can sort of spread across a population quickly that can kill a lot of people quickly, like the airborne agents, that kind of thing, and I guess this concept of fentanyl being readily accessible, easy to manufacture sort of thing is where that idea comes from. And, I mean, some of these House Congress people are pretty extra, but my understanding is that, and I've read like, very briefly, I've read like a sort of like a legal analysis of this classification, and it's not very appropriate. It's not very apropos. It sounds like you kind of agree with that for the most part, Herschel. But the scary part to me is that it's like, it does feel like fentanyl is invading our country. People are using drugs recreationally. There's one thing if people are addicted to drugs and they overdose, or their use just escalates. You start off with the pills, then heroin, then fentanyl. But it's another issue if people are just trying to get, the sort of standard recreational drugs, at least the ones that come in powder form, and it's adulterated with fentanyl and now apparently xylazine. That feels like an invasion of some kind. And I know we briefly talked about a CCP. I think a lot of the fentanyl precursors are coming from China. The manufacturing behemoth that China is, you probably know more about this than me, Herschel, but apparently China is also like a pretty much the greatest manufacturer of chemicals in the world, is my understanding. But those chemicals go to Mexico, and the cartels are the ones involved with the pushing of fentanyl into our country. So is it chemical warfare from China? Is it chemical warfare from the Mexican cartels? It's a little nebulous of a concept from what I can tell.
So that's the thing. That like path to entry, you can make that same argument for other things. Like, for example, oh man, the US sold these guns to ISIS and then they were killing a whole bunch of people. Oh, then ISIS, or whatever it was before it was ISIS, turned their guns that were sold to them by the Americans on, US troops. Who's to blame for that? We were knowingly, providing bin Laden. I don't remember like the exact facts behind it, but like, he was a freedom fighter at one point, before he became, super radical and blowing up the World Trade Center and shit like that. Like, so the question would be like, is the CCP like knowingly aware of what it is they're doing? And they
that's a good point.
Like, that's kind of the thing. So yeah, this, it's out of kind of the hands of the Mexican government. Like, they can do what they can to crack down, but like, there's corruption and shit there. And, even in the US, there's corruption like that. It's not just like we started this podcast off kind of saying, you can't paint, any nation really with such a broad brush to be like, oh man, they're to blame. And this is how we stop it. This is how we get them. We set tariffs, we boycott, we do this and that. Like that type of shit doesn't work in this global society that we now live in. I don't know how we solve it, really. It's and we don't have enough information about China itself and living conditions there to say like, oh man, are they suffering from an overdose crisis in the same ways that we are? And if so, how are they handling things? What we do know is that, there are overdoses happening in Australia. It's happening in Europe, other developed nations, things like that. But what I have read in research is that, in Australia, which is in close proximity to China, it's not happening in the same trends that it's happening in the US. They have fentanyl issues, they have overdose crises, but it's just not the same. And that may again be some societal differences that they have over there of how they approach medicine. They have, I want to say that Australia also has a universal healthcare system. I'm not positive on that, but again, look it up. But yeah, there are a lot of moving parts to it. I don't know how we solve it. And again, we need Chinese industry for all the other shit that we want. All these iPhones and shit like that people love. That's where you're getting them. All your Nike sneakers, that's where they're coming from. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword where, you know, all right, well, how do we stop them from exporting the bad stuff, but continue them exporting the good stuff that we want and need?
Exactly.
And I bought many of things off Amazon that happened to come from China, and I wasn't mad about it at all. Shout out to Jeff Bezos.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a complicated situation. Just the whole fentanyl thing in general. You know, it spans both of our disciplines, which, you know, are not that far apart, I don't think. But, you know, in some ways, it's like they're pretty diverging. You're in biostatistics and epidemiology, and I'm in mental health counseling and psychology. But the fentanyl thing like really taps into both of those areas pretty significantly in terms of, you know, the widespread nature of it on your part, and the sort of like personal circumstances that are leading people to use to sort of fall down this pathway towards this, you know, very destructive like opioid entanglement on my part, you know, the emotional components of that. But yeah, I guess we're just trying to like make sense of some shit that doesn't make any kind of sense. Some people have tried to make sense of it by calling it a weapon of mass destruction. That seems quite hyperbolistic.
Oh yeah, that's definitely extreme. You mentioned this talking about Lauren, or I always want to call her Lorena Bobbitt, but I know that's a different crazy white woman. But yeah, and the thing about it is like it's a substance use issue that stems not only from opioid use, but like I was mentioning, stimulant use is also, you know, very much on the rise, and it's causing a whole bunch of other like behavioral consequences, neurological deficiencies, suicidal ideation, psychosis, just general hostility and violence. You know, obviously we have the internet where it seems like violence is happening all around us all the time, you know, whether it's the internet or local news or whatever, showing you murders and all kind of shit that, you know, makes you just think every big city is a fucking war zone. It's not necessarily the case, but there is shit out there that's, you know, causing people to react toxically to everyday life. You know what I mean? And that probably again speaks to, you know, the dosing of U.S. society.
Indeed. The talk that I mentioned that you told me about is called Med Talks and Modern Warfare, Radiation and Current Events.
Oh, anyway. You're talking about from the conference.
Yeah.
So that was like on some broader shit too, because at this toxicology conference, they're talking about anything that kind of could be toxic, really. Mm-hmm. But many of the discussions there were focused on not only fentanyl and opioids, but xylazine, other stimulants, fucking cocaine overdoses in youth, synthetic cannabinoids, you know, and toxicity occurring there, particularly in like underdeveloped minds and shit like that. But yeah, that conference was a whirlwind. There were a million things happening. So I don't remember exactly what went down. That was like, I mean, it was a month ago now, happened at the end of March.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always interesting to go and listen to like other scientists doing the research, boots on the ground, physicians seeing patients that are like presenting with different things. One of the dope things about my job when I actually had first started, because we're trying to like understand basically the front lines of like who is seeing people overdosing and shit like that, whether it's EMS officers or fucking healthcare providers in the emergency department. We toured the Grady, shout out to Grady, the category 5 or type 5 trauma care center. It's the biggest trauma care center in like the Southeast or whatever. But we toured their emergency department, talking to them like, yo, all right, so when something comes in, how is it treated? What's going on? Are there standards? And the real answer is yes, and also no. You know, people are putting in whatever the fuck. You know, we're getting different dialects and different slang terms used across the country whenever people are writing up like, oh man, I had this patient come in and this happened. There are codes, there are standards to an extent that like get billed to like insurance companies and shit. So like there is something of a track record, but even then, insurance companies don't give a fuck. They care about the dollars. They want it to be quick and, you know, get their information in and get it out. and then pay out what they, at the very minimum, have to pay out. But there's a bunch more information of like, you know, a chief complaint. You come in, you tell the doctor 10 things, they might write down 1 or 2 of those things, you know, so it's very difficult to grasp the true breadth of, you know, what's happening. We have, you know, a good idea just because we've been doing this research for a while now. And even when I say for a while, the shit really didn't kick off in the truest sense till 2019. They didn't really start funding the shit for real until, I mean, you know, it just so happened your boy joined the team in 2019 and we really started getting our shit together. You know, I'm not saying that those two things are correlated, but yeah, they, you know, people weren't studying this in the capacity that they should have for quite a while. And, you know, maybe some lobbyists had some things to do with that. The same thing happened with tobacco. We didn't start studying tobacco for real until like 2011. And again, tobacco lobbyists and big tobacco was out here like, nah, you don't need to worry about that. We've all heard about the old studies where they were like, oh, no, it's actually good for you. Nah. Mm-mm. So I would wager that something like that kind of delayed us getting on the bandwagon to study opioids and kind of really hold pharmaceutical companies and stuff like that accountable for them fucking flooding the streets with poison. But I mean, we'll never know. Some of those things are just like big money. There's conspiracy theories for real. Like, yeah, we talk about the fun stuff and the funny stuff of, you know, the NBA and NFL being rigged or whatever. But like, it's real shit happening behind these doors, behind these closed doors. There's real conversations. There's real lives that are being lost. That's probably the biggest thing.
I got you. I feel you. Real quick, the presenter for that talk his name is Ziad Kazi. Great name.
Yeah, I think he works at Grady also.
Well, he's an Emory faculty, so shout out to him and shout out to Emory and shout out to Grady. Dude has 3 Z's in his name, man. That's pretty incredible.
Hold up, I shook this dude's hand. He was a nice person. Interesting doctor. I don't know that much about him though, but he gave me like a bit of his rundown. But yeah, I think he dropped the Emory thing and told me he was like a clinician at Grady too.
Oh, he's just staying with Grady. All right, well,
he just does a whole bunch of shit. That's the other thing. Like this dude is a older doctor. I gotta find his name to like really Google that shit. I'm almost positive that's who told me that. Gotcha.
Cool. Well, chemical warfare. Actually, I'm changing the title because of the podcast because it's not. I don't think it's technically biochemical warfare, but that's a podcast. Herschel, do we have time to discuss my mea culpas?
We do.
Okay.
I want to hear them.
So I've been teasing this for a little bit. I got 3 mea culpas. I actually might go ahead and release them on another Instagram exclusive or a different podcast. But if you want to listen to it, you got to go find it if it's not on this podcast. But
Hashtag RTPCH. Real talk beyond the headlines. We out. We out.
Okay, give me a second to breathe.